This is the new Sony 50 to 150 f2 constant aperture zoom lens, and Sony made this lens specifically for me. Well, not for me specifically in terms of like they asked me what I wanted and they made it, but for me in terms of this is a perfect lens to add to my bag. So I don't want to go too much into detail about, the build quality and the optics, and this isn't going to be like a full-on lens review because there's a ton of videos like that out already. But just like a quick flyby, this lens optically is prime level quality from 50 all the way to 150. Sometimes even outperforming primes that are within its range. And it has all the things that you would expect on, high level zoom lenses, autofocus, manual focus switch, full-time DMF switch. It has custom buttons. It has aperture clicks. It has an aperture ring. It has iris lock. It even has the little foot thing here so you can mount it to tripods and stuff like that. One thing it doesn't have is optical image stabilization, which all the camera bodies that I use have built-in IBIS within the camera, and so that's not a huge deal for me in use. I was able to use this like I would any other lens, so that's not a negative in my book, while it might be in yours, but for the way that I shoot, it's not. So what I want to spend the rest of this video talking about is why I think that this lens is perfect for me and the way that I shoot. So that I can kind of explain why it might be a good addition to your camera bag. So a lot of people, whenever this lens was announced, the instant thing that they wanted to do is compare it to this, which is the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8 lens, because they are very similar, right? So it's somewhat of a constant aperture f2, f2.8, like that's not that big of a variation. It has a similar range. It goes all the way to 150, although this one starts at 35. And so there is a little bit of that comparison there. They're kind of like covering a wide range, and they're very good focal lengths, both of them, for wedding photographers. Now, the reason why I think this lens is a better add for me than this lens is because of that 35 millimeter side of things. And so you might think that because I shoot majority of a day at 35 millimeters, that this would be the better option, right? Because it has 35 millimeters within it. Now, the reason why that's not true is because I found that when I use this for a full wedding day, when I'm at 35 millimeters for the majority of the day, what ends up happening is that I have a much bigger lens, a much heavier lens for the majority of the day when I don't actually need it, right? So for the times when I need to go past 35, this lens quickly goes from f2 to f2.8. So not only am I making more sacrifices within the wider ranges that I'm going to find useful, I'm also making a pretty big sacrifice for my 35 millimeter range, because optically this lens isn't as good as my 35 millimeter prime. And also while I'm at 35, it's slower, it's heavier. So I was making sacrifices on the 35 millimeter end, just so I had the added range. What this lens offers is that I can continue using my 35 millimeter prime, and then I can use this for everything else. And on that everything else side, this lens greatly outperforms this lens. And again, this lens greatly outperforms some primes within its class, especially because whenever I was shooting 35 millimeter and 85 millimeter, my main 85 millimeter was the Sony 85 f1.8. And so in the 85 range, this being at f2 is very close to that f2 range. Now, obviously this lens is much bigger, it's much heavier. But for me, the size and weight isn't unmanageable. Like, it is wider, it is heavier, but the weight isn't something that I found that was holding me back or that I found to be cumbersome. The only cumbersome side of it is that the little sling bag that I use, it's wide enough that it's hard to fit within one of those pockets. So I ended up having to put it in a pocket that's not necessarily made to hold a lens, and it worked just fine. But that was kind of the biggest drawback that I found when using this lens kind of like out in the field. But in terms of the way I shoot, I was able to now shoot a handful of sessions, an adventure session, a full wedding with this lens, my trusty 35mm lens, and then a 24mm lens. And those were the only 3 lenses that I brought and used for all of those sessions, minus some fun little lenses that I threw in here and there. But for the majority of the day, those are the only 3 lenses that I used. And so what this lens did is it just unlocks that added focal range while still going in an f2 aperture. So I have a little bit more light gathering ability than something like a 70-200 f2.8. Is this lens so much better and so much more, refined than something like a 70-200 f2.8, like the G-Master Mark II that I have over here on the shelf? Maybe not. Is it worth the extra money? Maybe not. But for me, I do think I'm going to sell my 70-200 and then a couple other lenses in order to add this to my kit. I believe that being able to go to f2 at 150, that bokeh is like super buttery and amazing. Being able to go to 50 instead of being stuck at 70 is also great, especially being a 35mm prime shooter. I can shoot at 35. And even when I used to shoot 35-85, there were times where I needed to be somewhere in the middle. And what this does is it unlocks the middle while still giving me the ability to go past 85 into the 135 and even past that into the 130 or into the 150 range. And so I think this lens for me and anybody that's kind of in that range where they shoot 35-85, this is just a fantastic option to add to the kit. And so that's why I think that this lens was specifically made for me, and why I would prefer this lens over something like the Tamron 35-150. One, because it is a constant f2, especially all the way to the 150. And then also because it cuts off the 35, making it so that I'm not like doubling up on my focal lengths or anything like that. So I can use my 35 for the majority of the day and then this for everything else. But let me know what you guys think. Where do you guys see this lens, and who do you guys think that this lens is for? And then as always, if you found this video useful, I'd love to like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And if you'd like to keep up with me, you can follow me over on Instagram at VincentImages_Jason, as well as if you want to see some more, the more premium content from me, things like image deconstructions, lighting walkthroughs, and all that fun stuff. You can find that over on Patreon. But yeah, catch you on the next one.